thereluctanthusband.com. So we're going to be doing part 3 on Cheol. What can I say? The guy did a lot. He was the owner of Okeh Records, which was the first record company on the Korean Peninsula. Um, and he was just an all-around great business person, strategist, and manager. So each owning OK Records, he really had to compete against larger record companies like Columbia. And so in order to do that, he went out and he hired some established throat singers at the time. So he had big names like Inan Young, he had Koboksu, and he had people behind the music like Song Mogin. Most of these members of OK Records were already established singers. However, there was one singer in particular who debuted with OK Records. Her name was Chang Se-jung. Ichul was an opportunist, and he had this really great, fresh-faced young singer, Chang Se-jung, and he was looking for a way to debut her. So, Chang Se-jung is a young girl who wants to become a singer, and at this time she's only about 15 years old in around 1936. And 15 years old sounds pretty young, but you got to remember, like Inan Young, she was touring Japan at around that age too. So he has plans for Chang Se-jung, and he plans to sign her to the record company. But before he announces that he's signing her, he sets up a singing competition in up on North Korea, now modern day North Korea, Pyongyang, and it's for amateur singers to compete for prizes. But Ichel knows full well that Chang Se-jung is going to win. He's just using the stage to hype not only his record company, but the new talent to his record company. And it all pays off because in 1937, Chang Se-jung has a hit song titled 연락선은 떠난다, which is a song that involves Inan Young's husband, Kim Hae-song, who we'll talk about later. So now things are going pretty well for Ichud and OK Records and all the singers involved. They've had a few years, they've had some hits going on, and throat is really catching on in the Korean Peninsula. But you have to keep in mind that OK Records is still a subsidiary of the Japanese record company Daiichiku. And one day, Daiichiku Records decides to take over the business part of OK Records. Although this is bad news, it really didn't stop Ichal in his tracks. He's an entrepreneur and he's an all-around businessman. So in 1938, Ichal develops the OK Grand Show, and the OK Grand Show featured Chosun Akukdan CMC. So this Chosun Akukdang or CMC is just a musical troupe, a traveling musical troupe. You can think a lot like vaudeville here in the States. So OK Records would take its talents on the road and showcase how well all of his talent could perform. So they played, they would tour in like Manchuria and they toured in Japan for a couple months and they'd play like 3 shows a day. They would perform in front of Koreans who were living and working abroad in Japan and other regions. However, their performances were getting recognized by Japanese critics, so much so that in 1939, CMC had a special feature performance in a Japanese movie. It wasn't all smooth sailing, as Koreans at this time were actually subjects of the Japanese authority. It was during the times when Japan occupied the Korean Peninsula. So there are stories of the Korean music troupe being forced to visit Japanese landmarks to pay respects and to sing pro-Japanese songs. They were censored for petty things like making the bass drum of the band look like the Korean taeguk or similar to that yin and yang symbols, uh, which would which the Japanese authorities were afraid that it was trying to elude Korean pride. Even accounts of members being jailed. But overall, the tour was very successful, and so they planned a second visit later that same year. And once again, the Japanese authorities were giving them kind of a hard time, and they were forcing the members of CMC to dress in Western fashion instead of anything Korean. So in 1939, while the group was playing in Seoul, the story goes that Ichul jumps on stage and says something to the effect that the Japanese are no match for Korean entertainers, uh, and thus Ichul was locked up for like 20 days. Ichul died 6 years later in 1944 at the age of 41. He died from a disease he contracted while touring in Manchuria and ending the days of the CMC. But with the demise of Cheol, it also gave an opportunity for other talents like we mentioned earlier, Kim Hae-sung, who is the husband of Lee Nan-young, or will be the husband of Lee Nan-young, and he was able to take the essence of CMC and change it to KPK, another musical traveling group. So that pretty much concludes the role of Ichul and how his OK Records uh, established, the first record company in South Korea to give a lot of opportunity to the talent living on the Korean Peninsula at this time. It was a very fascinating time on the Korean Peninsula. There were struggles between uh, trying to maintain their culture and language, struggling against Japanese authority, trying to find joy in music during hardship, and trying to keep developing and finding ways of making money when so much oppression was hanging over the peninsula at this time. So I think Ichal and OK Records and all the talent that he cultivated was really important at this time and has led uh, to what to a lot of what Korean music, pop music is in South Korea today.
쌍코도 울어 연락선은 떠난다 잘 갔어 잘 있어는 날 젖은 손수건 진정커 당신만을 사랑하